Welcome, everybody. It's so great to see you on this absolutely wonderful Sunday. How's everyone doing today? Good. Awesome. My name is Daniel Cobb. My pronouns are he and him. And we would just like to take a second and welcome all of you to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Pensacola. It seems like we have some new faces, which is always wonderful, and lots of old faces, which is even more wonderful. I don't know which is more wonderful. Not that kind of old as in you've been here a few times. So we have a lot of faces in the building today, and that is wonderful. And I just want to let you all know that everyone is welcome within this building. There's a lot of places in my life where, people say that they're welcoming of this, that, and the other, and then you get into it and you find the caveats of but I want all of you to know, in my personal experience and many of our experiences, that's not the case here, and that truly everyone is welcome and loved within these walls, as you should be outside of these walls as well. So, we have a wonderful presentation for you today, including an awesome speaker, Joe Vinson, and so we're going to... He does deserve applause, yes. So let's go right into the announcements, of which it looks like I only have one currently. And our announcement is that the Pagan group will be meeting in the teen room, which is located off to my right, and you'll right about there-ish. Just past the conference room, you'll find two rooms, one of which is the teen room. So they will be meeting there after the service, and new members are most welcome. Remember that next week we will need people to help set up the tables after the service for the First Fruits potluck on August 6th. There's a potluck next week? Awesome, I love food.
No, potluck is the following week.
The following week, excellent. So, with that, we're going to dive right into our centering music, which will also include the 7 Principles video.
Next week will be the 8 Principles.
Next week, I was wondering about that. For all the people who are new in the building, and maybe even some of the older ones, we have adopted an 8th principle, which we are excited to share with you up on the screen next week. So please be sure and return, and you'll get to see what that is, the grand unveiling. So let's go ahead. Now we will have the chalice lighting and the opening words. Our words today are by Henry David Thoreau. Make the most of your regrets. Never smother your sorrow, but tend and cherish it till it comes to have a separate and integral interest. To regret deeply is to live afresh. Please welcome with me up the choir. We will be singing hymn number 279, By the Waters of Babylon. Hymn number 279, By the Waters of Babylon. Now, if you would, please stand for the recitation of the covenant. That's on me. Love is the spirit of this church, and service its law. This is our covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Thank you. You may be seated now. Next up, we will have the Time for All Ages. We have a story video which will be presented on the screen called One Wave at a Time, and after that we will sing the children out. So,
hi, this is Jilly from Caring Matters. Today I'm going to read One Wave at a Time, a story about grief and healing by Holly Thompson. Pictures by Ashley Crowley. We used to be 4, Mum, Dad, Ben, and me. Now we are 3, Mum, Ben, and me. Sadness comes and goes in waves. There are places where Dad used to be. At the table for dinner, on the sofa napping, on the stoop with his guitar, in the car next to Mum, on the sidelines at games, or waiting with Ben. When sad waves roll in, too many, too fast, I dive under my bed with a flashlight, a pile of comics and Dad's green shirt. Down there it's a submarine, quiet and safe beneath stormy waves. Along with sad waves come mad waves, towering and strong, cresting like tsunamis and crashing ashore. Ben throws his toys. Mum yells at the ceiling. I wreck Dad's guitar. Some waves are fear waves that curl me in a ball. Will Mum, did Dad, could I have, should I not have? Fear waves leave fear stones that make my stomach ache. Some days there are no waves, just flatness. I'm like a robot as I ride the bus, walk the halls, sit at my desk. Voices seem far away, my body is slow, the world is away. Happy waves, too, slip in to tickle and tackle when Mum smiles or my team scores a goal or when I play boats with Ben. Some happy waves stay a while, others rush away. Waves of all kinds tumble in, one after another, in no special order, unpredictable as the sea. Waves barely there, waves I can ride, waves that break and crash. But lately, we join other families tumbled by waves. In groups, we talk and play, and when the question ball asks, "What do you miss?" I say, my dad's songs and the way he sang them, slow and full of blues. We talk about death, what it is, and how it happens. Our talking stick travelling the circle as we share how our special person died. Strangers become friends, friends help strangers. In groups, we ride the waves. At home, we make some changes, move furniture, hang memory flags, fix Dad's guitar. I fill a grief first aid kit with things that soothe, putty, soft cloth, smooth stones. And we add to memory boxes, Dad's guitar picks, shells, funny jokes he told. Sometimes we talk about Dad, say things we never said, ask things we never asked, or we hold hands, sing, lean on me, even Ben joining in. Or we're quiet, just breathing together, Mum, Ben, and me. One day we rescue a chair from the trash, clean it up, paint it fresh. So now on special days when people visit, we eat Dad foods, sing Dad songs, tell Dad stories, and share Dad memories in the memory chair. When Mum cries now, I don't hide. When Ben whines now, I don't usually yell. And when I spy a wave, I inhale slow. The waves still come, sad waves, mad waves, flat waves, and fear waves. But when they roll in, I surf them, one wave at a time.
And now, if you will, please join us in singing the children out to their activities, which I'm sure will be fun and wonderful. We will now move on to the offertory. I have a note on here that first we will be showing the Timmy 2, Too Timmy, Too Furious video, and then we will be moving on to the offering slide. So 1 minute on the baskets as we go through the Too Timmy video.
Timmy and the Automated Pledge Payment, a public service announcement from your UUCP finance team. This is Timmy. Timmy is a member of UUCP. Timmy used to give small cash offerings to the church, but his financial circumstances have changed since then. Timmy has examined his new budget, and he has decided that the time is right for him to pledge. This makes the finance team very happy, and like all of us, Timmy loves making the finance team happy. But there's one problem for Timmy. He wants to pay his pledge once a month, but he no longer carries much cash. He's also very busy and forgetful. He's always leaving his checkbook at home. Poor Timmy. Timmy saw the text to give number on the screen at church, but he's trying to be very particular about putting charges on his credit card. But if he doesn't bring a check to church, and he doesn't use text to give, what's poor Timmy to do? Timmy got an idea. He considers himself a 21st century fellow, and he uses online banking to pay some of his bills, like his car payment, which are the same amount every month. Could he use his online banking to pay his pledge? Yes, he can. He can use his phone app or his computer. Timmy went to his bank's website, which may look different from yours, to the Bill Pay section, and entered UUCP as a payee. He put in the amount he wanted to pay and made it a recurring payment once a month. Now the church gets a check from Timmy's bank in the mail every month, right on time. And Timmy doesn't have to worry about it at all. And unlike text to give, it doesn't cost Timmy or the church a penny. Timmy's pledge-paying worries are over. Yay, Timmy!
That, of course, is by one of our members who has moved away but is still near and dear to our hearts, Erin. I don't appreciate how she just renamed Daniel into Timmy and then displayed my life story up there at times, but that's okay. Now, we are going to move on to collecting the offering. This is the time when you can pledge the treasure that you have. We absolutely love donations of time and talent as much as anything, but we have to keep the lights on as well. So this is when we accept your contributions to do just that. We will also be blessed having Mike on the piano, and his partner Rivka will be coming up to present a song, Esa Anai. Yes. I would like to introduce to you today Joe Vinson. I think we've already said his name and he's been speaking a little bit. But Joe is an accomplished speaker, and every time he's been up here, it's been wonderful. A historian who has helped document the hidden history of Pensacola, brought many things to light that are best brought to light and not just left in the dirt. So please welcome up Joe Vinson.
Hi, everyone. Yes, my name is Joe Vinson, he, him pronouns. And today I'm going to be talking about Tisha B'Av. As a disclaimer, this is a program about a very solemn day in Judaism, and I am not Jewish, ethnically, culturally, religiously. So I can't claim to have a full understanding of the day and its traditions, but I hope that my perspective as an outsider is respectful and is mostly accurate as I try to condense it into a short service for an audience of mostly similar outside perspectives. I apologize in advance for butchering pronunciations or nuance in these concepts. In Judaism, there are kind of several categories of holy days. A lot of the happy ones tend to follow the format of, they tried to kill us, we're still here, so let's eat. And sometimes there are trees. Here's a helpful matrix for reference. So I hope you enjoyed that moment of levity. There will probably be a few of those in this service. The subject of this program, Tisha B'Av, as you can see, is not one of the happy ones. They tried to kill us. They were successful, so we will be fasting. Tisha B'Av is Hebrew for the 9th of Av being the 5th month in the Hebrew calendar. Tisha B'Av marks the date when a number of calamities befell the Jewish people. Most notably, for the purposes of today's program, it was the date of the destruction of Solomon's temple by Nebuchadnezzar's army in 586 BCE, which marked the beginning of the Babylonian exile. According to tradition, it was also the same day, Tisha B'Av, in 70 CE, when the Second Temple was destroyed by Romans in the siege of Jerusalem, where the historian Josephus estimated that more than 1 million people were killed and 97,000 more were enslaved. Several other ancient calamities are said to have happened on Tisha B'Av, including when the children of Israel decided not to enter the Promised Land because of the negative reports of 10 of the 12 spies of Moses. It was also when Romans crushed the Bar Kokhba revolt in Betar in 135 CE. Later events that coincided with Tisha B'Av included the start of the First Crusade in 1096, the expulsion of Jews from England in 1290, France in 1306, and Spain in 1492 as part of the Inquisition, and the Nazi authorization of the Final Solution in 1941, among other events. Because the Hebrew calendar is lunisolar, Tisha B'Av doesn't line up with an exact date in the Gregorian calendar, and it ranges from mid-July to mid-August. This year, Tisha B'Av starts at sunset this coming Wednesday, July 26. You would never say Happy Tisha B'Av. It would be very inappropriate to greet your Jewish friends with Chag Sameach. Some solemn holy days have alternate greetings. For example, on Yom Kippur, you might say Gemar Chatima Tova, which means a good final sealing, the idea that your name has been written or sealed in the book of life for the coming year. Tisha B'Av is intended to be a day of mourning and internal reflection, so generally you don't greet people at all on the day. So if you see a Jewish friend on Tisha B'Av and say, hey man, and they don't respond, don't take it personally. If you say, hey man, and your Jewish friend boos or shakes a noisemaker at you, you might check your calendar again because it's probably Purim. And if anyone got that joke and had a chuckle, I appreciate you. Tisha B'Av is also the last day of what's called the 3 weeks, or the Bein HaMetzarim, which is between the dire straits. So in 70 when the Romans were attacking Jerusalem, the 17th day of the month of Tammuz was when they breached the walls. And then 3 weeks later is Tisha B'Av, when, again, according to tradition, the temple was burned. Some observe the entire 3-week period with increasing wariness and solemnity. Jewish weddings generally don't happen during this time. There are restrictions on eating meat, shaving, bathing, listening to music, etc. Because it's associated with danger and bad luck, many people will avoid things like air travel. And the intensity of these observations rises until Tisha B'Av itself, when observant Jews are supposed to refrain from eating or drinking, as their health allows, working, washing, or bathing, except for ritual bathing up to the knuckles, wearing creams or oils, wearing leather shoes or comfortable shoes, and engaging in marital relations or extramarital relations. The idea is to abstain from anything pleasurable, to mirror the physical and spiritual discomfort and dislocation felt by those who came before. Even studying the Torah is limited to only the distressing parts, because studying the Torah is intended to be an enjoyable thing. And the last meal you eat before fasting, the Seudah HaMafsaket, is a piece of hard bread and a boiled egg dipped in ashes. And you eat it while sitting on the floor or in a low chair. Tisha B'Av is one of the 5 Jewish holy days when a scroll is read aloud in the synagogue. These scrolls are known as the 5 megalot. All 5 come from the 3rd section of the Tanakh, or the Hebrew Bible. The writing section, or Ketuvim. Tanakh is an acronym, TNK, Torah, Nevi'im, Ketuvim. So these all come from the 3rd section. So for example, on Passover, the Song of Songs is read. On Purim, the Book of Esther is read. And on Tisha B'Av, the Book of Lamentations is read as the evening liturgy. And it's usually done in dim light or candlelight. This reading typically uses what's called cantillation, or te'amim in Hebrew, to chant the scripture in a particular way. We don't have time to hear an entire reading of Lamentations, but I wanted to share a short video of a cantor performing a portion of it.
יהודי מעוני ומרוב עבודה היא ישבה בגויים לא מצא מנוח כורפיך השיגוך בין המצרים דרכי ציון אבלות מבלי באי מועד כושעריך שוממין כהניך נאנחים בתולותיך נוגות והימלה.
Yeah, I just think it's lovely to hear it, the language. Sorry that it was out of sync there. So that night, many will sleep on the floor or without the comfort of a pillow. And the next morning or after the evening reading, congregants will read or chant kinot, which are Hebrew elegies, psalms of mourning, about the various Jewish tragedies. Some of them have been written, in the last few decades or certainly the last century after the Holocaust. Again, this is often done while sitting on the ground. While the fast ends at nightfall of the second day, many restrictions are maintained until the following midday. The strictness of adherence varies between communities and, of course, from individual to individual. Lamentations is known in Hebrew as Echa, which is the first word of the book, and it usually translates to alas or woe, like woe is me. And it's a pretty good summary for the book. It's a very bleak work because it is about the siege of Jerusalem by the Babylonians and the start of the captivity or exile. So a quick recap of Jewish history as told in Scripture up to this point. Abraham has a special relationship or covenant with God, called Adonai as a substitute for the ineffable name. His grandson Jacob, also called Israel, goes to Egypt with his 12 sons who become the heads of the 12 tribes. Moses leads the Israelites out of Egyptian slavery to Canaan, the promised land, but they must wander for 40 years before Joshua helps them conquer the Canaanites. After a period of time, when the 12 tribes are governed by leaders called judges, Saul establishes a united kingdom that is continued by King David and his son Solomon, Solomon builds the temple in Jerusalem as a permanent house, or dwelling place for Adonai. After Solomon's reign, the United Kingdom splits in two, Israel to the north and Judah, which includes Jerusalem, to the south. The Neo-Assyrian Empire conquers Israel, and later Judah becomes an Assyrian client state. Then the Babylonians invade and make Judah pay tribute to Babylon, which Judah doesn't like. After one rebellion, Babylonian King Nebuchadnezzar II besieges Jerusalem and deposes King Jeconiah, who was only 18, and replaced him with Jeconiah's uncle, Zedekiah, who was only a little bit older at that time at 21. And after a while, Zedekiah decides to rebel against Babylon as well. And again, Nebuchadnezzar comes with his army to lay siege to Jerusalem. And here's what 2 Kings has to say about what happened next. Quote, "By the 9th day of the 4th month, the famine in the city had become so severe that there was no food for the people to eat. Then the city wall was broken through, and the whole army fled at night through the gate between the two walls near the king's garden, though the Babylonians were surrounding the city. They fled towards Arabah, but the Babylonian army pursued the king and overtook him in the plains of Jericho. All his soldiers were separated from him and scattered, and he was captured. He was taken to the king of Babylon at Riblah, where sentence was pronounced on him. They killed the sons of Zedekiah before his eyes. Then they put out his eyes, bound him with bronze shackles, and took him to Babylon." So think about that for a moment. His sons were killed in front of him, and then they blinded him, which meant the murder of his children was the last thing he would ever see. And, it's one thing to say the famine had become so severe that there was no food for the people to eat. But that kind of understates the horror of a siege situation. Lamentation gives more of a bottom-up perspective of what the citizens of Jerusalem experienced during the siege. Quote, "All her people groan as they search for bread. They barter their treasures for food to keep themselves alive. Our skin is hot as an oven, feverish from hunger. Because of thirst, the infant's tongue sticks to the roof of its mouth. The children beg for bread, but no one gives it to them. My heart is poured out on the ground because my people are destroyed, because children and infants faint in the streets of the city. They say to their mothers, 'Where is bread and wine?' as they faint like the wounded in the streets of the city, as their lives ebb away in their mother's arms. Those killed by the sword are better off than those who die of famine. Racked with hunger, they waste away for lack of food from the field. With their own hands, compassionate women have cooked their own children. Should women eat their offspring, the children they have cared for? Young and old lie together in the dust of the streets." So you can kind of feel the horror of the situation. And while many things in Bible are, contested, the historicity of things is not always backed up by archaeological evidence. The evidence of the siege of Jerusalem is very real, and the Babylonian captivity. So after the fall of Jerusalem, a large portion of the surviving population is forced to leave Judah and travel to Babylon, which, as you can see, is a really long way away. And they stay there for decades. They're not slaves per se. They're basically taken to help boost the Babylonian economy. But look at that map and think about the words of the song we heard earlier to give it context. "By the waters of Babylon, we sat down and wept for thee, Zion. We remember thee, Zion." Babylon is eventually conquered by the Persian Empire, and in 538 BCE, Persian King Cyrus allows the Jews to return to their homeland under a form of self-governance, and they eventually rebuild the temple in Jerusalem, and that's the second temple that's destroyed by the Romans in 70 CE. The siege, the destruction of Solomon's temple, and the subsequent exile were extremely traumatic events, as you can imagine, because of the privation and violence, but also because of the cultural identity that Jews were Adonai's chosen people. They had to reconcile their religion with the undeniable reality of an utterly crushing defeat. The temple was God's resting place, and it was destroyed. Quote, "He has not remembered his footstool," footstool being the mercy seat, the Ark of the Covenant. "He has not remembered his footstool in the day of his anger. The Lord has rejected his altar and abandoned his sanctuary. He has given the walls of her palaces into the hands of the enemy." Much of Lamentations tries to explain how this happened, how God was punishing the people of Judah for breaking their covenant by worshiping foreign gods and idols. Jerusalem is described as a promiscuous, sinful woman who was once rich and haughty but had been brought low. This is a metaphor that's repeated many points elsewhere in Scripture. And Lamentations has all 5 of the stages of grief in it. Denial. Quote, "How deserted lies the city, once so full of people. All her friends have betrayed her. They have become her enemies. Our ancestors sinned, and are no more, but we bear their punishment." Anger. Quote, "The Lord is like an enemy. He has swallowed up Israel. He has broken my teeth with gravel. He has trampled me in the dust. I have been deprived of peace. I have forgotten what prosperity is. So I say, my splendor is done, and all that I had hoped from the Lord. I remember my affliction and my wandering, the bitterness and the gall." Bargaining. Quote, "Look, Lord, and consider, whom have you ever treated like this? The Lord is good to those who hope in him. It is good to wait quietly for the salvation of the Lord. For no one is cast off by the Lord forever. Though he brings grief, he will show compassion, for he does not willingly bring affliction or grief to anyone." Depression. Quote, "In the days of her affliction and wandering, Jerusalem remembers all the treasures that were hers in the days of old. This is why I weep and my eyes overflow with tears. Why do you forget us? Why do you forsake us for so long?" And acceptance. Quote, "The Lord is righteous, yet I rebelled against his command. Listen, all you peoples, look on my suffering. My young men and young women have gone into exile." There's also a healthy dose of spite at the Babylonians. Quote, "All my enemies have heard of my distress. May you bring the day that you have announced, so they may become like me. Pay them back what they deserve, Lord, for what their hands have done." In the words of Taylor Swift, "Maybe I got mine, but you'll get yours." The book closes on a pessimistic note. Quote, "Restore us to yourself, Lord, that we may return. Renew our days as of old, unless you have utterly rejected us and are angry with us beyond measure." That's the end of the book. It leaves open the possibility that, maybe that relationship with Adonai is irrevocably broken. Lamentations does not identify its author, but it is traditionally credited to the prophet Jeremiah, which would mean it would have been written before the actual siege. And this accreditation is mostly because in 2 Chronicles 35:25 it talks about Jeremiah writing a lament for King Josiah, who was Zedekiah's father, and he died decades before the Babylonian siege. But Josiah is not actually mentioned in the book of in Lamentations, so most people don't consider the traditional credit accurate. And there's reason to believe that Lamentations was not written by a single author. It has 5 chapters, and each chapter essentially has a completely different style, perspective, order of events. Chapters 2 and 4 probably date to around a decade after the siege. Chapters 1 and 5 are probably near the end of the exile, and chapter 3 could be even later. And scholars can make these inferences because of literary influence from other books that have more solid dating, like Ezekiel and Isaiah. In fact, a lot of the books from Hebrew Bible are believed to have been written during the exilic and post-exilic periods due to the existence of Persian, Aramaic, and Greek loanwords or spellings. Many of these books have a similar sense of hopelessness. Ecclesiastes, which many consider to be one of the greatest and most influential works of literature, was also likely written during the exilic or post-exilic period. It begins with a sentiment that, quote, "Everything is meaningless. I have seen all the things that are done under the sun. All of them are meaningless, a chasing after the wind." Quote, "Again, I looked and saw all the oppression that was taking place under the sun. I saw the tears of the oppressed, and they have no comforter. Power was on the side of their oppressors, and they have no comforter. And I declared that the dead who had already died are happier than the living who are still alive. But better than both is the one who has never been born, who has not seen the evil that is done under the sun." So, when you think of the Babylonian siege and exile as this hugely formative and traumatic event, and that much of the Hebrew Bible was written in the aftermath or canonized in the years following the exile, it provides a useful lens to look at the rest of Scripture and the kind of recurring theme of the Jewish people kind of falling in and out of of love and faithfulness with Adonai. There's also something interesting about the format of Lamentations. Each of the 5 chapters has either 22 verses or a multiple of 22 verses, and in 4 of the 5, these are acrostics, which means that the first line starts with a letter of the alphabet, kind of like, L is for the way you look at me. So the first line would start with Aleph, the second line starts with Bet, the third with Gimel, and so on for each of the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. And the impression this gives is completion. Just like we have the phrase from A to Z, meaning that you've done something in its entirety, Lamentations gives a thorough reckoning of grief from Aleph to Tav. Or another interpretation is that the people of Jerusalem have sinned completely from Aleph to Tav. And it's also an example of how people use art, in this case poetic verse, to cope with grief and loss and trauma. And I want to talk about that for a while. Most of us will never suffer through a famine or a city's destruction. I don't think any of us will be like poor Zedekiah, whose last sight was the murder of his children. But the reason why Lamentations is read every year on Tisha B'Av is to put the listener into the mindset of those who suffered, to use our capacity for empathy to feel a fraction of that grief. And that's what art does. Pablo Picasso painted the massive 25-foot wide painting Guernica after reading an eyewitness account of the 1937 bombing of the Basque town in northern Spain by fascists. It remains one of the most famous and moving pieces of anti-war art because it makes you feel the suffering when you look at it. On a smaller scale, all of us have experienced loss. We've had loved ones die. We've felt betrayal. We've suffered traumas. We've gone through the stages of grief. We've all had sad waves and mad waves and flat waves and fear waves. This painting by Claude Monet is of his first wife. It's called Camille Monet on her deathbed. She was 32 when she died. And it's just such an intimate moment and a heartbreaking image. And the fact that he wanted to make it a permanent reminder, that he turned it into something that could be shared with others and to make him remember the feeling, I think is very powerful. Music is another way we express sorrow and grief. We heard the beautiful music that Rivka sang today, and we've listened to a portion of the cantillation of Lamentations. While most of us can't appreciate the linguistic nuance of the original Hebrew, we can recognize the beauty of how it sounds and the innovative acrostic structure. Countless generations of people use art and ritual to try and make sense of tragedy. In times when I've lost people close to me, my own creativity has basically cratered, but I've taken great comfort in listening to music, sad music. Delta blues musicians, Samuel Barber's Adagio for strings is a classic. The Sarah McLachlan song from Toy Story 2. I would just lay in bed and listen to a playlist on repeat. Not because it makes me feel good, but because I wanted to feel miserable, and eventually that made me feel better. So that brings me kind of to the end of my presentation, but I wanted to take the opportunity to invite others. If you feel so moved, certainly don't share anything you're not comfortable sharing, but if there has been something that has helped you, I'm curious, how has art helped you cope with loss, grief, or trauma? So if you're willing to share, raise your hand, and Daniel will come around and let you speak into the microphone. But otherwise, we can end it there, but we'll just we'll get it started. All right. Well, thank you everyone for sharing. If you want to share privately, of course, we could do that during our coffee hour or later. But that will conclude my presentation. I want to thank you all, and I'll hand it back over to Daniel.
I would like to invite the choir back up and everyone else to stand as you're willing and able to also join in for closing hymn number 127, Can I See Another's Woe? Again, that's closing hymn number 127, Can I See Another's Woe? Our closing words for the day come from Khalil Gibran, and they are, "The deeper that sorrow carves into your being, the more joy that you can contain." Go now in peace.